Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So if you are new here, so don't forget to hit that subscribe button and click on the bell icon so you never miss out our latest technical tutorials and the tips. Today we are diving into an essential concept for anyone working with the Microsoft Power Apps, that is delegation. Understanding delegation can significantly improve the performance and efficiency of your apps, especially when working with a large data set. So what exactly is delegation? In simple terms, delegation is the process where Power Apps uploads data processing to the data source rather than pulling all the data into the app for processing. This allows you app to handle large amounts of data without running into performance issues. In this video, we will cover the basics of delegations, explore some common functions that support delegations, and show you practical examples of how to implement it in your Power Apps project. By the end of this video, you will be able to handle a solid understanding of how to make your apps more scalable and responsive. So let's get started and take your Power Apps skill to the next level with the delegation. So agenda for this video will be what is delegation, why delegation important, how delegation works, delegation warnings and limits, what should be the best practice for using the delegations, and some important interview question and answer that mostly asked related to the topic delegation in the Power Apps. So let's start what is delegation. Delegation in Power Apps refers to the process where certain operations are delegated to the data source for processing rather than being executed with the Power App itself. This means that instead of retrieving all the data from a data source and then performing operations such as filtering, sorting or searching locally, Power Apps send the operation to the data source to execute it. The data source then returns only the relevant subsets of the data to the app. Let's understand why delegation important. So there are multiple reasons because of that delegation is important in the Power App. Let's understand few of them. Performance. So by delegating operations to the data source, Power Apps can handle large data set more efficiently. So this reduces the amount of data that is transferred over the network and also minimize the processing load on the client device. Next one is scalability. So the app that rely on the delegation can scale better than as they can manage and process a large volume of data without significant performance degradation. Next one is efficiency. Delegation ensures that only necessary data is retrieved, reducing the time it takes for operation to complete and improving the overall responsiveness of the app. Let's understand how delegation works. So when a function or operation in Power Apps is delegable, Power App generates a query that is sent to the data source. After that, the data source receives that one and process the query and return the result. In this way, the process relies on the capability of the data source and the connectors that are used in the Power Apps. So it means all the functioning will happen at the data source level rather than at the app level. So there are some delegable data source because there are all data source is not a delegable. Okay, there are few of them only is the delegable data source. So common data sources that support the delegation includes Microsoft Dataverse, and Microsoft Dataverse provides full support for delegation across the wide range of functions. Next one is SharePoint. SharePoint support the delegation to the certain operations and functions, and it also has some limitations. SQL Server offers the robust delegation support, and it allows the complex queries to be executed on the server. Azure SQL database, similar to SQL Server, it provides comprehensive delegation support. There are some of the delegable functions. So Power App functions can be categorized into two parts, delegable and non-delegable. So delegable functions are those that can be executed on the data source, such as filter, sort, search, and lookup. So what is filter? Filter retrieve the records that meet the specific criteria. Whereas sort basically makes a sorting on the particular specific fields. Search, search basically find the record that contain the specific text into the data source. And lookup, lookup basically retrieve a single record that meets specific criteria. Some of the non-delegable functions also there in the Power Apps, that are sum, average, max, min, length, user defined function. So sum, average, max, min, these aggregate functions often require all the data to be brought to the client side processing. Length, calculate the length of the text string. And user defined functions, these are the custom functions that are created within a Power Apps. What is delegation warning and their limits? So when creating an app, Power App provides warning if any operation is not delegable. You can see the warning sign in a yellow color. These warnings indicate that the operation might lead the performance issue if it is not addressed. So it is crucial to hit these warnings and modify the app to use delegable functions and operations whenever possible. So Power App imposes a limit of the number of records that can be processed locally, and that is by default set to 500. This limit can be adjusted in the app settings, but increasing it may affect the performance issue. What is the best practice for using the delegations? So there are few of the best practices that we should follow. Like use delegable data source, we should use the delegable data source. Optimize query, we should optimize the query by using the filter, sort, and search data. Monitor the delegation warnings, we should pay attention to the delegation warning and adjust the app logic accordingly. Test with large data set. First test your app with a large data set to identify if any potential performance bottlenecks are there. Adjust the record limit. Modify the record limit setting if necessary, but be mindful whatever can be the performance implications. Let's go to the some interview questions that are asked related to the delegation topics in the Power Apps. Question 1. What is delegation in the Power App and why it is important? So delegation in Power Apps basically refer the process where the app delegates data processing tasks to the data source instead of retrieving all the data to the client and processing it locally. So why this is important? This is important because it improves the app performance by minimizing the amount of data transport over the network, and it also leverages the data source processing power. Proper use of delegation allows the app to handle the large data set effectively. Which data sources support delegation in the Power App? So these are the data sources that support the delegation. Dataverse, SharePoint, SQL Server, Common Data Service, Salesforce, Dynamic 365, Azure SQL. How can you identify if an operation is delegable in the Power App? So in Power App, delegable operations are indicated by a blue underline under the expression in the formula bar. If a part of the formula is not a delegable, Power App display a warning triangle in the formula bar. Additionally, the non-delegable part will also be a blue squiggly line, and the warning message will provide detail that what is the not delegable. What are the some common operations that may not be delegable in the Power App? So there are few operations that may not be delegable in the Power Apps, that are certain filter operations such as start with, complex formula that involve the multiple functions, some aggregate functions like count if, lookup on the large data set, nested are the deeply complex if and switch statement. How can you work around delegation limitation in the Power App? So to work around the delegation limitations, you can limit the data collection. You can use the first end to limit the amount of data that is retrieved in the app. Patch data locally. You can retrieve necessarily data locally and patch it back to the data source. You can split query, break down complex query into the simpler one. You can use the collections for the local processing, but be cautious about the performance with the large data set. You can reprocess the data. You can use the data shaping techniques for the server side. What is the maximum number of records that can be retrieved in a non-delegable query in Power Apps? So although the maximum number of record that can be non-delegable in the records is 500, but you can increase the limit up to 2000 by using the advanced setting. Can you give an example of the delegable and non-delegable filter operation in the Power App? So delegable filter operation is this one filter, then is the data source name, then department is equal to HR. This operation is delegable to data source like SharePoint, SQL Server, and non-delegable operation function is the filter implies start with name A. So start with is a non-delegable in many data source, which means Power App will retrieve the data locally and perform the filter on the client side. How do you check the delegation status of a function or expression in the Power App? So you need to look at the blue underline in the formula bar which indicate delegable function expression, sorry, and pay attention to warning message in the formula bar that indicate the non-delegable expressions. You can also use the app checker tool to identify the delegation warnings and the errors in your app. What strategies can be employed to improve performance in the Power App when dealing with large data set? So these are the strategies that we should use to improve the performance that are using delegable query. So always prefer to use the delegable queries to minimize the data transfer and the processing time. Incremental loading. You should use the data. You should load the data incrementally using the collect with the pagination technique. Efficient data model design. So you should optimize your data model to reduce complexity and improve the query performance. Data caching. Caching frequently use the data in the collections to reduce the repetitive data calls. Next one is the optimized formulas. So simplify complex formulas to avoid non-delegable operations. What is the role of the first n function in handling non-delegable operations? So let's first understand what is the first n function. So first n function is used to limit the number of records retrieved from a data source, which can be useful in handling the non-delegable operations. For example, first n, then filter, then implies start with name A and 100 count. So this retrieve the first 100 records where the employee name start with A. While start with is not a delegable, but first n helps control the amount of data that can be processed locally, and it prevents the performance issue from the large data set. So thank you so much friends for watching this video, and if you have enjoyed this video, so don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe our channel for more content like this. And your engagement with this video will definitely help us to grow and create more exciting video for you. And I will personally appreciate each and every one of our subscribers. Until the next time, take care and stay awesome. Thank you.